This video will examine the question of whether advances in technology still result in the creation of more and better jobs than they destroy. This question is directly related to the technological inheritance argument for universal basic income, because the continued creation of good jobs directly affects how a universal basic income will be paid for. The technological inheritance argument was introduced in more detail in another video, but here is a short refresher. We live in a modern economy in which over 80% of our GDP is not the result of the efforts of any individuals or companies. It is produced instead by the value-creating power inherent in the knowledge, technology, and infrastructure that society has accumulated over centuries. That societal heritage is in the public domain. In other words, we, the people, own it, and the value it produces belongs to all of us by simple inheritance, by birthright. Therefore, society has every right to require the payment of a royalty or user fee whenever a private enterprise uses our societal heritage in the creation of commercial value. Those payments would then fund a universal basic income, or UBI. Now, it can be argued that in the past, those payments were made. They were made in the form of worthwhile jobs that paid a living wage and enabled workers to enter the middle class. In today's world, however, advances in automation and artificial intelligence have made it possible for business owners to increase their revenue while employing ever fewer workers. As a result, there are no longer enough worthwhile jobs for all who need and want them, and proper payment for the use of our societal heritage is no longer being made. Some people will disagree and claim that throughout history, technology and automation have always managed to create more and better jobs than they destroyed. I believe that that used to be the case, but I also believe it is no longer true. Let's examine the evidence. This chart shows the distribution of the U.S. labor force by economic sector from 1840 to 2020. Economists often divide our economy into three sectors: agriculture, which includes hunting, fishing, forestry, and farming; industry, which includes construction, mining, and manufacturing; and services, which is conveniently defined to include everything else. That is certainly helpful, since it makes the percentages on this chart add to 100%. We see that in 1840, nearly 70% of our labor force was involved in agriculture. Since that time, due to automation and the consolidation of small farms into larger ones, the agricultural labor force has declined to where it is less than 2% of our overall labor force today. And yet we have all of the food we need and a nice surplus for export. Clearly, automation has not created more and better paying jobs in agriculture than it destroyed. But then, no one claimed that automation would create new jobs in the same sector in which they were lost. And in fact, we see that the percentage of our labor force in the industrial sector increased steadily from 1840 to 1950, with a short dip during the Great Depression. But then, in 1950, the percentage of our workers in industry also began to decline. According to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, U.S. manufacturing employment peaked in 1979, and by 2019 it had fallen by over one-third. Clearly, automation has not created more and better paying jobs in industry than it destroyed. Many people like to claim that our declining industrial employment was a result of sending production work overseas. But consider these numbers. U.S. manufacturing employment fell by over 26% between 1987 and 2019. However, in that same period, our inflation-adjusted domestic industrial output increased by 67%. So, not only did our domestic production increase, but output per worker more than doubled. The fact that only one worker is now needed to produce what used to require two workers is not the fault of overseas labor. It is simply due to improved automation. So, workers have been forced off the farm and out of the factories, but since the unemployment rate is low, they must be finding work in the services sector. So everything is fine, right? No, everything is not fine, and for the following two reasons. Number one, the unemployment rate is a misleading statistic. Our labor force consists of those who are working or are actively looking for work. The unemployment rate is the percentage of those people who are still not employed. It does not count those who become discouraged and drop out of the workforce altogether. Those dropouts are better accounted for by the labor force participation rate. This slide shows the U.S. labor force participation rate for men and women, separately and also together. The participation rate is defined as the percentage of working age persons who are currently working or are actively looking for work. For men, that percentage has been declining steadily, from 87% in 1948 to just 68% in 2024. The only thing that caused our overall participation rate to increase after 1948 was the increased participation of women. The participation rate for women rose from 32% in 1948 to 60% in 2000, but has been declining ever since. The result is an overall total participation rate that, as of 2024, stands at a 46-year low. So, automation and consolidation have driven workers off the farm and out of the factories and into the services sector. And while the overall unemployment rate is relatively low, that is only because it ignores the decline in the labor force participation rate. Many will concede that automation can replace the manual labor and brawn of farm and factory work, but they will also claim that the fine motor skills and the mental and interpersonal skills needed in the services sector can never be automated. However, recent advances in artificial intelligence and robotics are continually surprising us with their inroads in those areas. Some authorities are even predicting that eventually all human skills will fall to automation. For those who cannot imagine that happening, I offer this historical example. At their peak, over 20 million horses and mules were used in the U.S. for agriculture and transportation. Today, the number is too small to warrant a census. The internal combustion engine effectively resulted in the total replacement of their labor. The horses that remain today are simply kept as pets. In summary, I will concede that there was indeed a time when automation created more and better jobs than it destroyed. However, in today's world, that is simply no longer true. As a result, worthwhile jobs are no longer sufficient payment for the use of our societal heritage. But all is not lost. We, the people, will accept payment in cash, and we will use that cash to fund a universal basic income. Once again, I thank you for your attention to this important topic. Please consider leaving a comment. I read them all. Also, please subscribe to this channel and press the like button so that this topic will be recommended to a wide audience.